Raise your hand if you've ever walked away from a conversation thinking, why didn't I say something? Someone says something that bothers you. You feel it right away, but your mind just goes blank. You stay quiet, and then hours later, lying in bed, the perfect response pops into your head. Clear as day. Too late. I used to think this meant I wasn't quick enough or confident enough. Turns out, it's way more interesting than that. Today, I want to share what's actually happening in your brain when you freeze and why the regret hits so hard after. So here's the thing. When you freeze in a conversation, it's not because you're weak or you lack confidence. It's actually way more biological than you think. I spent years being so frustrated with myself every time this happened. I'd replay moments over and over thinking, what's wrong with me? Why can't I just speak up like everyone else? But once I learned what's actually happening in your body during these moments, everything clicked. And honestly, it made me way less hard on myself. Your brain has 3 main survival responses: fight, flight, and freeze. Freeze is just as automatic as the other 2. Instead of reacting or running, your system pauses you. This happens when the threat isn't physical but emotional. Fear of judgment, fear of rejection, fear of losing respect. Your nervous system treats social threats seriously because historically, social exclusion meant danger. And this is the part that blew my mind. Your body can't tell the difference between being physically threatened and being socially threatened. So when someone challenges you in front of others, or interrupts you, or dismisses what you're saying, your nervous system kicks into the same gear it would if you were facing actual danger. That's why your mind feels empty in that moment. Not calm, empty. You're not choosing to go blank. Your system is choosing for you. I remember being in a meeting once where someone completely dismissed my idea in front of the whole team. I had so much I wanted to say. I could feel it all sitting right there. But I just sat there, nodding, smiling, saying nothing. It wasn't until I got in my car 20 minutes later that I finally found my voice. And by then, it didn't matter. I drove home having this full conversation with myself about what I should have said, and I felt so angry at myself for not being able to access any of that in the moment. Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting. Why do the perfect words show up later when it's already too late? Like, why does your brain suddenly become so articulate and clear when you're alone in your car or lying in bed at night? This used to drive me crazy because it felt like proof that I did have the words all along. I just couldn't access them when it mattered, and that made the whole thing feel even worse. But there's actually a really specific reason this happens. When freeze activates, your brain shifts resources. The areas for language, reasoning, and flexible thinking temporarily go offline. Your brain focuses only on monitoring the threat. Later, when you're safe and alone, the threat is gone. Your nervous system relaxes. Your thinking comes back online. That's when clarity returns and you can suddenly construct perfect responses. So you weren't incapable in that moment. Your brain was literally prioritizing survival over self-expression, which sounds dramatic for a conversation, I know. But to your nervous system, it's all the same. And here's what nobody tells you. That clarity you get later, that perfect response you finally find, it doesn't just feel satisfying. It actually starts to hurt. Because now you have proof that you could have said something. You replay the conversation. You imagine how different it could have gone. You picture yourself saying exactly what you wanted to say. And that's where the regret really sets in. I used to lie awake at night doing this, just running through conversations over and over, rewriting them in my head, feeling worse every single time. Because the more I replayed it, the more I convinced myself that I messed up, that I should have been stronger, that I let myself down. Now, most people think the regret comes from not speaking up, but that's not really what's happening. The silence itself isn't the problem. It's what you tell yourself about the silence. Regret doesn't come from silence alone. It comes from self-judgment. You don't just think, I didn't speak. You think, I failed. I looked weak. I let myself down. This creates a loop. The more you replay it, the more emotionally charged it becomes. The more your brain labels future similar situations as threatening, the faster freeze activates next time. Over time, this shapes your identity. You start seeing yourself as someone who doesn't speak up, and this is the part that really got to me, because I realized I wasn't just staying quiet in conversations anymore. I was becoming someone who expected to stay quiet, like I'd walk into situations already bracing myself for the moment I'd freeze, already planning how I'd beat myself up about it later. It became this self-fulfilling prophecy. And the worst part? I started avoiding certain people, certain conversations, certain situations where I knew I might get challenged or put on the spot. Not because I didn't have anything to say, but because my nervous system had learned that staying silent was the safest option. I remember turning down opportunities to speak up in meetings, letting other people take credit for my ideas because I didn't want to risk the discomfort of defending them. And every time I did that, I told myself the same story. You're just not the kind of person who speaks up. You're better off staying in the background. But here's the thing. That story wasn't true. It was just what my nervous system had learned to keep me safe. And the more I told myself that story, the more real it became. So the real question isn't, how do I force myself to talk? It's, how do I help my brain feel safer in these moments? Because confidence isn't something you can just demand from a nervous system that feels under threat. I learned this the hard way. I used to try to hype myself up before difficult conversations. I'd give myself pep talks. I'd tell myself to just be brave, just say it. But that never worked, because I was adding another layer of pressure to a system that was already overwhelmed. What actually helped was completely different. 3 shifts that actually help. Shift 1, reframe what freezing means. Freezing is a protective reflex, not a personal flaw. When you stop attacking yourself for it, future freeze responses become less intense. Shift 2, expand what counts as a response. You don't need the perfect sentence. Simple responses help regulate your system. Let me think about that. What do you mean? Give me a second. Shift 3, change how you rehearse afterward. Don't ask, why didn't I say anything? Ask, what would help me feel safer next time? This trains your system toward regulation, not shame. Let me break these down a little more, because they're simple, but they completely changed how I navigate these moments. The first shift, reframing, sounds basic, but it's huge. The next time you freeze, instead of immediately going to, what's wrong with me? Try, my nervous system is trying to protect me right now. That one sentence takes you out of shame and into curiosity. And when you're curious instead of critical, your system starts to relax, because you're not adding more threat on top of the threat you already felt. The second shift is about lowering the bar for what counts as responding. You don't have to deliver some perfectly articulated comeback. Sometimes the most regulating thing you can do is just stay present. Say something simple like, let me think about that for a second. Or, can you say more about what you mean? Those aren't weak responses. They're grounding responses. They keep you in the conversation without demanding that you perform under pressure. And over time, your nervous system learns that you can stay in these moments without freezing. The third shift is what you do after, because this is where most of us mess up. We replay the moment and we rehearse all the ways we failed. But what if instead you replayed it and asked yourself, what did I need in that moment that I didn't have? Maybe you needed more time. Maybe you needed the other person to slow down. Maybe you needed to feel like it was okay to not have an immediate answer. When you start asking that question, you're training your brain to look for solutions instead of assigning blame, and that makes a massive difference over time. These shifts won't make you magically confident overnight, but they will start changing how your nervous system interprets these situations. I still freeze sometimes. I'm not going to lie and say I don't. But now when it happens, I don't spiral. I don't spend the rest of the day replaying it and hating myself. I just notice it. I get curious about it. And I move on. And honestly, that's made all the difference. So if I had to sum it up, freezing when you want to speak isn't a character flaw. It's your nervous system trying to protect you. The regret fades when you stop treating silence as failure and start building safety instead. Your turn. When was the last time you froze in a conversation and regretted it later? What do you wish you had said? Drop it in the comments. I really want to know.